Friends and neighbors, our honored guest, Master Van Ripen,
I always
not
start
only
with
are we
so.
gathered tonight to celebrate the sanctity
So,
of this wonderful faith
SEW,
of little
so
Franciscans,
Sue, so we reap as we sow.
to rejoice at another turn. A new masterpiece from the hand of my son-in-law, Johannes Vermeer.
I guess this animation I'm doing, once again, derived primarily from interference patterns of Archimedes spirals, off-center, essentially wrapped around a unit circle or a unit sphere in a particular way, with color filters. And it's haphazard how I went about creating this image.
Distilled from the urine of sacred cows, fed only on mango leaves.
My entire process, I do hope to
glazed my wife,
formalize. And when I say I just mean the one I came upon. Because ultimately,
no stinting, eh?
It's all part of, the big thing, the big pattern.
His temper, paranoia, and downright aggression spell trouble to those closest to him.
Mater, pattern, mattern.
Color, perspective is true, the illusion.
But then there's the on the scenes mater pater, and there's the behind the scenes mater pater. And I guess each are opposite to each other, so in some sense when people
for your next
worship,
we cannot expect
they call
you to
it
give up
Father
Emily
Sky
for so long
and Mother
again.
Earth.
Considered? It's already in hand, didn't I tell you? A coming fellow from Amsterdam, studied under Rembrandt van Rijn, though who hasn't these days?
It's funny that the Earth should be called Mother. I guess though, like Earth patterns being even would be maternal, in so much as odd patterns would be polar and paternal.
Is there another patron?
But yeah, ultimately behind the scenes,
I've not yet found a subject.
that thought, behind the scenes, well, I guess I've read about and thought about the whole idea of like spirit and soul, and I've been persuaded, which doesn't mean it's right, but I've thought about a lot of stuff, and I've been persuaded by the idea that the soul, people talk about the soul and the spirit interchangeably. And I've been persuaded that the soul is primary, and the spirit is secondary. And there's a lot of question then when we come into the body, as far as what is, how does spirit and how does soul relate to the body? And if one body has one soul, I guess in one sense one body has many souls, but a body has a primary soul.
It's just...
And then what is that? What is the primary spirit? If we had primary soul and primary spirit, it seems as though, the body would be primary. The body would be corrected in that way. I guess I'm getting off topic and getting off what I can even symbolically, or what I can symbolically talk about, or what I can talk about while getting away with. Seeming like I know something, which I don't. And by the way, I don't. But anyway, what I wanted to get to with this color filter pattern is where things meet, and the whole idea of patterns, and what I like, I don't know, something about the Archimedes spiral, man, it's just, or what's also been called the Pythagorean spiral. I've seen different ways that the you know, Pythagorean spiral has been reinterpreted, or that the Pythagorean triangle has been reinterpreted, and as far as like rational trigonometry and quadrants, where you can begin to calculate without using Pythagorean triangles, but the entire mathematics of it is built upon Pythagorean triangles. And that's if we're only considering a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And, at least in, you know, popular culture, which is very important. People stress like the secrets and like the height of things, but like popular culture, you know, the center of popular culture is essentially where we're at. And no one, I shouldn't say no one, barely anyone ever talks about a squared plus b squared plus c squared equals d squared, in which case a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and a squared plus b squared plus c squared equals d squared. The c squareds are different squares, unless we make them the same, and then what does that say? Then that's something completely different. Where your a squared plus b squared diagonal equals your quote-unquote z-axis. I mean, what's that? That's something else. I mean, I don't know. But it has to be figured out. Never mind e equals mc squared. Never mind e equals mc1, c2. 1 and 2 being subs. I mean, I don't know, but I hear these things, I read about these things, I think about these things, and, you know, but at the end of the day, or not at the end of the day, but it seems as though at the beginning of the day, it all comes down to Pythagoras, and can we ever get outside of Pythagoras' reach?
She gets that from
you know, a triangle, a right triangle.
There, now I forgot. We must speak with Willem.
Can we ever get out of a right triangle? No. When we look at the, you know, crop circle phenomena, or when we look at, God, I hate to do it, but I'm going to do it. You know, oh boy, there was a certain president who one time spoke at the CIA, and he talked about, you know, building buildings without columns. I can't help, you know, immediately my mind went to the idea of, you know, everything is built on right angles and it's so powerful. But what if we built without them? And then, like, one time I watched this really awesome video about dudes who built arch ceilings without using supports. They just built them.
He started a new
and then we talk about like physics and like CERN and all this stuff, but like, can you build an arched ceiling without supports? Mud, brick, made of mud. It's like mud one time plus mud a second time. No arcs. Arched ceiling stands for years and years and years and years and years. I mean, that's genius. That's like, you know, math in motion. That's like everything. Builders, people who make things, but yet who understand the concepts. And in one sense, that's what I'm reaching for, and in one sense, that's what I'm terrified of. Like, the profundity of the gross is, it blows the mind. Blows the mind. Anyway, to make a long story long, as I always do, I can't even ever get to the preface, never mind beyond the preface to the body. What I was trying to say about this particular image is where things meet. And there's an obvious, like, structure in this, and what I like about this picture is that lines come up. It appears more three-dimensional than a lot of my other things. Like, a lot of my things appear three-dimensional in motion, but without the motion, they're very two-dimensional. What I like about this picture is that a lot of the stills are a little more three-dimensional, which speaks a little more to three-dimensional meats as two-dimensional planes interact. And that, what I wanted to say about that is because everything always has to do with the infinitely small and infinitely large, and the way in which they harmonize. And the infinitely large and the infinitely small, as I understand it, and I know I'm name dropping, but I don't understand it. I don't understand Hegel, but I've heard it referred to that, like, you know, Hegel identified the good infinity and the bad infinity. The good infinity being like the separation of essentially a one into infinite parts, and bad infinity being like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so on and so forth into infinity. And so there's that whole deal. And then also the whole idea between order and chaos. And what we call order is like a pattern we can identify, and chaos are the patterns that we can't identify. And so trying to find like a compromise between order and chaos is kind of like a false, it's a false ideal, or it's a false goal, because in one sense, like, the order that we know or that we can identify may or may not be, but predominantly the order that we can identify is the predominant order. You know, collectively, the order that we can identify is the predominant order, and the order that we can't identify as the predominant chaos. And the predominant chaos is either the order that has left, is the order of the past, or is the order of the future. You know, because true infinity requires dynamism, which requires time. You know, and they say, like, things come around, or is like history repeats itself, or Mark Twain said it really well, like, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. But I don't know if it necessarily rhymes either. But that's a good good way of saying it. And anyway, one of the things I like about or think about, or what was triggered in me by looking at this image that I've been working on, and I made the image, you know, several years ago, but I've created the color animation today.
I won't tell you again.
Easter. The day after 420. Memorable for two reasons that I can think of. So, anyway, what I like about this is that I don't understand it. And in some sense, the way in which I've overlapped things has created order and chaos. But I started with a certain order, and chaos ensued, or what I assume to be chaos, you know, happened afterwards. And there, you know, essentially I started this with an Archimedes spiral, and at this point I've replicated it so many times, like, I don't know how many Archimedes spirals are there, perhaps millions, maybe billions, but yet they've condensed upon this shape, which takes form. And the important thing I just wanted to say about this was how chaos is the order that we don't know, and what we call order is the order that we've known. And as one order passes to another, we consider it, you know, order to chaos, and order from chaos. But it's all order. And maybe it can all be known. Maybe it can't all be known by me. Save the cheerleader, bro. Sis.